You ever see some act of vandalism, a smashed window or graffiti, and just think to yourself, what was the point of that? Nobody got paid, nothing was really gained. It seems like it was just done for the hell of it. Well, if you've ever asked that question, you're not alone. A sociologist back in the 1950s was trying to figure out the exact same thing, and we're about to get into his fascinating theory.
So yeah, that's the big question, right? Why would someone commit a crime that has no obvious payoff? This really bugged a sociologist named Albert Cohen back in 1955. He wasn't so interested in, say, a bank robbery where the motive is obvious. He wanted to understand the kind of delinquency that just seems pointless. Why steal a car just to dump it in a lake? Why start a fight over nothing?
Cohen actually had a specific name for these acts. He called them non-utilitarian, malicious, and negativistic. Now I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but let's break it down. Non-utilitarian just means it doesn't serve a purpose, like making money. Malicious means it seems intentionally mean or destructive, and negativistic. That means it goes directly against what society says is the right thing to do. So the key here is that he wasn't trying to explain all crime, just this very specific and very puzzling kind of crime. Okay, so we've got this puzzle. What's the answer? Well, for Cohen, the solution was what he called subculture theory. And his big idea was that you can't understand this by looking at one kid in isolation. You've got to look at the group they're part of. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Cohen argued that this whole problem doesn't start on a street corner. No. It starts in school, a place where every kid from every background is supposed to be judged by the exact same set of standards. But what if, Cohen asked, that system is rigged from the very beginning?
What Cohen said was that schools basically run on one set of unspoken rules and values. He called it the middle-class measuring rod. Think about it. These are the values of the teachers, the principals, the whole system, and that measuring rod becomes the one and only way to measure success for every single student, no matter where they come from.
And right there, you get this massive clash of cultures. On one side, you have the school's middle-class values. Be ambitious, plan for the future, learn to wait for your reward, respect other people's property, and definitely control your temper. But on the other hand, a lot of working-class boys grow up with a totally different set of values. The focus is on having fun now, being spontaneous, and hey, sometimes you settle things with a fight. See the problem? It's like they're being forced to play a game where they were never taught the rules.
So what happens when these boys are constantly judged by a standard they just can't meet? They experience something Cohen called status frustration. And it's exactly what it sounds like, a deep, nagging feeling of failure and not being good enough. They're stuck in a competition they feel like they can't possibly win. And that leads to a whole lot of stress, anxiety, and just feeling worthless.
So what do you do when you're in that spot? Cohen said there are basically three ways it can go. A few kids become what he called college boys. They buy into the middle-class system and work their tails off to succeed by its rules, even though it's an uphill battle. A lot more become corner boys. They pretty much just give up on the school's version of success and withdraw. They're not going to win that game, so they stop playing. But then, there's a third group, the delinquent boy. And this group doesn't just withdraw, they actively rebel. They completely reject the system that made them feel like failures in the first place.
And this is where the delinquent subculture, the gang, comes into the picture. For the boys who choose to rebel, the gang isn't just about causing trouble. No, it's a solution. It's a way for them to finally solve that painful problem of status frustration. You see, all these boys who feel like they're failing in the mainstream world, they find each other, and they realize, hey, I'm not the only one. It becomes a collective solution to a problem they all share. They form a new group, a subculture, where they can finally feel successful, because in this new group, they're the ones who write the rules. So, let's just quickly remember those middle-class rules that the school pushes. Ambition and planning, respecting property, controlling your aggression, and delaying gratification. For these boys, these aren't just abstract ideas. These are the very things that made them feel like they couldn't measure up.
And this is the absolute heart of Cohen's theory. The delinquent subculture takes those middle-class rules and turns them completely upside down. Ambition and planning, that gets replaced with impulsiveness and just having fun. Respect for property? Nope, that becomes disrespect and vandalism. Controlling aggression? That becomes a world where violence is okay. And waiting for your reward? Forget it. It's all about immediate gratification, right now.
By flipping the rules like this, the group creates what Cohen called an alternative status hierarchy. It's a whole new game with a whole new way to win. All of a sudden, these boys can gain status and respect. How? By being the best at breaking the old rules, by being the most impulsive, the most destructive, the toughest fighter. The very behavior that got them labeled as failures in school is now what makes them heroes in the group.
And this quote from Cohen himself just sums it all up perfectly. The delinquent's conduct is right, precisely because it is wrong by the norms of the larger culture. In other words, an act of vandalism is good because mainstream society says it's bad. That's the whole point. It's a direct attack on the very value system that rejected them.
Now, Cohen's theory was totally groundbreaking in the 1950s. It really was. But like any big idea, it's had its fair share of criticism over the years. So the question is, how well does it really hold up today? Well, critics have pointed out some pretty big limitations. For starters, the theory is almost entirely about working-class boys. What about girls? It doesn't really say. It also has a hard time explaining why some middle-class kids, who shouldn't have this status frustration, still get into trouble. And then there's the fact that most of these so-called delinquent boys eventually just grow up and become regular, law-abiding adults. And maybe the biggest challenge today is that a lot of modern gangs seem to be all about making money, a very practical, utilitarian motive that doesn't really fit Cohen's for the hell of it model.
So this all leaves us with one final, really interesting question to chew on. Was all this pointless, destructive behavior truly a deep psychological rebellion against middle-class values, a desperate search for status? Or, as some critics might suggest, is the answer much, much simpler? Were they just kids out there looking for a thrill and having a little fun? It's a debate that's still going on.